As today is coming close to the end, I want to share some of the things that I wrote about earlier today because I find them so fascinating. And the first of these things was this idea that what if the real world as we know it is actually more like a dream than we may think? And this isn't to say that you're in a dream now, because we all know from personal experience the feeling of being in a dream is different than being awake in the waking world. But this idea that came through the writing was, what if our waking day-to-day life is in a world that's actually more like a dream than we may think now? So if you were to imagine a spectrum, and one end of that spectrum was a dream, and the other end of that spectrum is what we think of when we think of the real world, maybe the world we actually live in is somewhere in the middle. And this is very liberating because it opens up so many more possibilities. For most of us, when we think of the real world, we think of this material world where we have to work hard to build things, and things that we do in the outer world have very little to do with the inner world. But in a dream, on the other hand, when something appears, we assume it's already living in our subconscious, and we just manifested it because all of it's happening in our mind. So the question that was posed as I was writing today is, what if the waking life that we experience is like that, where we don't just create things in the outer world, in the material realm, but the seed of every single thing that we manifest in our life and build initially starts in the inner world inside of us, just like in a dream. So I thought that was fascinating, and that was the first chapter I wrote. And then in the second chapter, immediately the writing that came through was, it said, before we continue further and start questioning your current worldview, we need to establish a strong foundation. Because if you don't feel safe and secure in a foundation, then your mind's not going to want to keep questioning the worldview because it doesn't feel safe, because everything that it may have known is now being questioned. So before we can continue further down that path, we need to find something that we can root ourselves in, a place of stillness within ourselves that we can always return to feel safe, before we start questioning some big assumptions that our mind has held for a long time. And I found this chapter to be so interesting because it talks about how most of us, and myself included in the past, and even now I can see it sometimes, try to find safety and groundedness in the material world. So a lot of us try to find a place of stillness and rootedness in things like money or our romantic partner, or even in our own identity and ego. But the problem with doing that is this material world is constantly in flux. It's always changing, and despite how things may appear, if you root yourself into anything in the material world, you're going to feel insecure at a certain level because all of it could go away in an instant. So money is one of the most well-known examples of this, but even if you're wealthy beyond belief and you have millions and millions of dollars, there's still going to be a fear in the back of your mind that, what happens if I lose all this money? What happens if all this money goes away? And because that opportunity, that option is present and a possibility, there's never going to be a complete sense of rooted safety in money. Another great example is in a romantic partner. A lot of us are either in a relationship, or we think that having this perfect relationship is going to complete us. But the problem when we try to find a sense of rooted security in a romantic partner is that people are always changing and growing. And if we find that sense of safety in a person, we're not going to want them to change and grow as an individual, because for them to do that would threaten our safety. If they change and we made them our rooted sense of peace and stillness, we don't want them to change, at least on some level. And at the same way that our partners will change and evolve over time, we change too. Our egos and identity, if we're growing, are constantly changing. And very often, if we go through these periods of transformation, we may not even recognize the person that we used to be. So if we try to root ourselves in our identity and our ego, we're going to prevent ourselves from wanting to grow, because to grow and transform our persona and identity would mean to lose our sense of rooted safety. And that's that feeling of just having the ground pulled out from under us, which our mind does not want at all. So then the question that was posed by the writing is, if we can't find a sense of stillness and rootedness in anything in the material world, where do we go? And then the conclusion was, we have to go inward. We have to root ourselves in something that lives eternally and that can never go away or die or change. And since everything in the material world that we experience is transient and always changing, we have to root ourselves on something that's eternal, which is the divine. And as this book continued, it talked about how we all have a connection to the divine through our heart. And there's this infinite well of love, divine love, that's eternal, that is the source of everything that we experience in the outer world. And to the degree that our heart is open is the degree that we allow these infinite blessings to enter our life. And this is because every single thing that we experience in the material world is first birthed from the inner world. And where it's birthed from is that spring of infinite divine energy that lives in our heart. So we may think that if we have money, it's because of a certain job we got, or if we found a romantic partner, it's because we went out on a lot of dates or went to these social gatherings. But at a much deeper level, every single thing in the material world is not something that we created as our human ego self, but instead is something that was manifested from nothingness. So everything first arises from nothing. It has to. And this inner well of love that lives within our heart is that divine well that's infinitely capable of creating anything that we want. It'll manifest everything. And what this means, I know this sounds a little strange, but stay with me. What this means is everything we attract in our life is not our source. If we get a certain job and start making a lot of money, that job and the money that we get from that job is not our source, but instead that inner well that lives within our heart is our source. And that inner well of energy that's infinite and creating everything we experience in the material world is what created that job, what attracted that job to you, and what created the money and attracted that money to you. In the same way with romantic partners, it's still a beautiful thing to be with someone for life or however long you feel called to be with them. But even let's say you have a significant monogamous partner, they're not your source. They came and arose from that inner well of infinite energy that's divine, that's eternal, that lives within you. And although it may appear that they're your one true romantic partner and your source of intimacy and love and connection, they're just a manifestation of your true source, which lives inside of you, that was birthed through your heart. And you can apply this to everything, even your own persona and ego. All of that has arisen from this source of infinite possibility. It's a place of nothingness and stillness through which everything is born. And the way that we access this unlimited amount of energy, this stream of overflowing abundance that creates worlds, that creates everything we experience in the material realm, is by keeping our heart open. We can't open ourselves to it by thinking about it or using affirmations or kind of using our mind to try and create things from this place that the mind just can't do. We need to keep our heart open. The more open our heart stays, no matter what obstacles or things we come across in our life, the more we allow this infinite divine energy to be birthed into our world. And eventually, as we do this more and more, we lose this sense of our personal human will, and instead we begin to merge with divine will. And divine will is when we act upon our intuition and our impulses, and we channel that infinite creative energy to create beautiful things filled with love that have never existed in this world before. So it's all inside out. And just by knowing this, without doing anything with this knowledge other than becoming aware of it, we stop looking to things outside of ourselves as our source, and therefore our sense of foundation and security is rock solid. If we root ourselves in that infinite, eternal, divine energy that's channeled through our heart, that's always there, no matter how much we use it, it's never used up, it's in infinite amounts, then what is there to fear? There's nothing to fear. And we may lose all our money, we may lose all our material possessions, we may even lose our romantic partner, we may lose everything we thought we needed in the external world, but if we know deep down that those things are not our source, and instead our source lives within and is purely divine and eternal, then we would be okay if those things went away. Doesn't mean we wouldn't like it. I mean, it would suck to lose those things, but your sense of self-worth and identity isn't attached to anything in the external world, and instead it's rooted in your true self and your heart and who you are. And people can feel that. When someone feels that you're rooted in that eternal energy that can never be shaken, you can be at peace in your life and you can be at ease. No one can threaten you when your foundation is built on something rock solid that can never be taken away from you. If you build your foundation on something that's shaky, then the universe may attract circumstances to make you question that foundation and make you feel like it's going to slip out from under you. But if it does that, it's only to help you grow so you can re-ground yourself into the true foundation, which is your godlike nature that lives within. This infinite well of beautiful, loving, just pure love itself energy that's divine and lives in you in infinite amounts. And the way we access that beautiful energy is we just keep our heart open. And sometimes it can be hard to keep our heart open. Sometimes we want to close our heart and we get scared and our body's trying to protect itself. But ultimately, our hearts are the most powerful energy center in our body. And when we channel that energy through us, that divine infinite energy, we feel so much love in our own aura and in our own selves. And that love then radiates out into the world. And by becoming a channel for this love and aligning our own personal will with divine will, we realize that we actually get to channel and bring a lot of this loving energy from an infinite source into this world for others to share and enjoy as well. So just by you being happy and feeling that energy of love, you then share more love with the world. So that's all I have to share with you, but I was having so much fun when I was writing and the stuff was coming through, and I also enjoy talking about it with you. So I love you. Thank you for tuning into this video. And I'm going to put a link to go along with this video. So if you want to check out the books that I have already written and my YouTube channel, if you're not already subscribed, and also a link to donate if you feel called to, that's always greatly appreciated. And other than that, I just hope you have a wonderful day.